Welcome to the latest episode of the LARPA, I was going to say virus podcast. I have coronavirus in the brain. Not literally, of course, figuratively. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. If you've tuned in to the previous episodes, we've been giving you blow-by-blow, minute-by-minute accounts. Now just remembered, maybe memory loss is a thing now. Mary's also here on the posh part. On the balcony in the posh part of Madrid. Prepositions, what do they even mean? How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much.
That's good. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for us if everything goes according to plan, which, because we're eternal optimists, it is. So we're going to talk about those phases. We've also been in 3 newspapers last week on account of our book, Fake News, available in all good bookstores. And because of the coronavirus, I don't think it's selling. So get out there, do your bit. And also, we popped up in an Instagram chat between 2 authors. One author was interviewing. It sounds like it's sort of a joke. One author was interviewing another author. You know these people, their names. Who are they again?
One is a journalist of a local paper, but another one.
Yeah.
What?
Because I was looking for. I was like the author and the author. I thought you knew their names. I didn't want like a synonym of a writer.
I know the names, but it doesn't mean anything to our foreign listeners.
That's true. Okay, well, basically these 2 people, right? They're fucking class. And one girl was interviewing this man, and he just pulls our book out of thin air.
One girl was interviewing this man. Okay.
Don't turn this sexist. That's not what I meant. Sorry, one woman was interviewing a man. All right.
Okay, a famous writer was talking to a journalist.
I said that initially, yeah. And when I say lads, I'm not like the meaning my male friends, by the way. Just while we're on the subject of words, but so she was asking him about fake news, and he pulled out our book and started talking about it, and he seems to be a big fan of it, and he said it was a good summary of fake news, and then we actually thanked him on Twitter, and then we nearly fell over. We were tickled pink. He replied to us and retweeted us, and he said, again, great summary, lads. No disrespect with using lads. That's what he also said. And it was a week of minor celebrity. It was pretty cool. And then we'll talk about that, of course, in due course. And we'll also talk about meditation, a style of Indian dance, which I think will be popular because we have a lot of listeners from India now. So hello to you. Actually, do you know how to say hello in any language? No, you don't. Okay, no problem.
In any language? No, I know in a few languages, but I don't think Hindi.
And then finally, we're going to talk about another movie from Lebanon, another documentary, which was pretty spectacular. And that would be the podcast. So I think a pretty full itinerary today. And I am starving, by the way. And before
I think in 6 hours we should be done.
Hopefully. Now we've been spending our time very wisely. I've been writing another ebook, which on pain of death I cannot reveal more about because I'm ghostwriting it again. So apparently, according to you, I've been misspelling Waring's surname, and I checked, and you were correct about that. So, which is a clue
to me.
Yeah, and how you actually spell it, those 2 things, which are very compelling. And also before this, we were on Skype talking about misheard movie titles, weren't we?
No, we weren't.
Yes, we were.
You were just being a clown as usual.
Which is a fair observation. I will give you that. Okay, so, phases. Phase 1 to 4. By the end of phase 4, we're going to be out of this quarantine. I mean, in some senses, I'm sure we'll be living with the legacy of this for a while before we return to a full normal state. But as the Spanish spokesperson, as the only Spanish citizen on this podcast, maybe you can run us through what all this means for us.
Well, we are on to almost week 8 of confinement, so that means we've been stuck at home for 2 months. So congratulations us for surviving and not going nuts more than before.
I've actually discovered I don't need people or the outside world, so I think I might just self-isolate for the rest of my life now.
It's quite liberating, isn't it? You understand like hermits and stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, still, I am wearing a fancy shirt. There might be
Yeah,
one of
yeah, you're the trendy person.
there might be one of us who's been sauntering around the house in leggings or something, or comfortable pants. I won't say who.
Listen, like you could be like a journalist, like yeah, nice shirt, but we don't know if you're wearing a tracksuit bottom, a shell suit or
What am I
God
showing you
knows.
right now? I'm showing
I don't know. I can't see.
white trousers. Not not in that way. But I
White
am.
trousers.
What? Trousers?
White?
Is that the
Do
wrong
you say white?
white? No, no, no. Okay, doesn't matter. There's a bit of a
No,
lag
white.
here.
Todo white. Okay.
Fair enough. But for example, yeah. So we've been in confinement for 8 weeks, but there's going to be a de-escalation.
Oh yeah, I
And
was telling you about the face. Yes, we're in the week 8, so well done to us. And then basically we're on phase 0, and then from next week, oh, no, next week is still phase 0, and then we'll start with phase 1 and so on. So from the 11th of May, we'll have 4 phases, and each one is meant to be 2 weeks, assuming all the indicators are what they're expected to be in terms of number of people infected, number of deaths, and so on. So if everything like keeps going the way it's going, every 2 weeks we should enter a new phase. And well, little by little things will start reopening, but with limited capacity, 30%, and then it'll just keep on increasing. And yeah, it's quite a
okay,
funny
great.
situation because in the first phase, basically, if you want anything from a small shop, you have to make an appointment. So, for example, if you want anything from the DIY shop, like if you want a spanner, you have to ring the shop and then say, I'm gonna go at 3 o'clock to pick it up, and then you just go and give it to you, and you leave. This is the system.
Since we run events sometimes, and most of the time they're pretty packed out, but sometimes they're not. So could we run one of our more less successful events, like just like normal under the new rules of this phase of the quarantine?
Well, I think it would be packed, like considering it has to be a third of the capacity. It's
Only
just
one
gonna go
person
like little
showed
by
up.
little.
Yeah, well, that's just for safety,
Yeah, because it's just
not
to keep
everything.
like social distancing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I mean, this weekend, people can go for a walk for an hour and do exercise outside. Apparently, according to you, today, it's going to be
Everything is
announced.
according to me today.
Yeah. I don't know who you're working for. Either you're explaining things on my behalf, or you're explaining things on the government's behalf. You're kind of like the spokesperson for everybody at the moment. Because what you told me on behalf of Pedro Sanchez was that they're going to be announcing, when people are left out, it'll be staggered, and maybe certain age groups will be out at a certain time, and others won't. But from what I heard as well, like from the weekend of May 12th, and again on the proviso that everything is going according to plan, people will be able to visit each other in their homes or even terraces of bars that are open, for example. So, I mean, potentially from next week onwards, this Vallecas to the Posh Bar in Madrid Skype calling might be redundant. This could be the last coronavirus quarantine special. I'm
Fingers
already.
crossed.
I know you have a look of resignation, but I'm already celebrating. So, I'm just an internal optimist. Every time the 2 weeks is over, I think like this is finally we're out, and then there's an extension. It's like this is the last
No,
extension.
that was me. That was me. I've been on denial ever since this started. Apart from now, when we are about to come out, when I'm like, nah, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, so it's the phases. Is there anything else you want to say about the phases?
No, it's complicated. I mean, because for example, for the hotels and
Well, yeah,
bars, it's just it's certainly at the moment for the bars and restaurants that are supposed to be opening the week after next. At 30% is very complicated because sometimes, it's like 30% is not very much. There's bills to pay, and there's staff, and is it really worth opening for 30% of the business? This is what is being discussed at the moment. But
Yeah, because even people were saying, football could come back, hashtag not a football podcast, and games could be behind closed doors. But I think there's an estimate where even for a game with no spectators, you still needed 264 people to be present. So coaching staff, medical people as well, maybe some type of stewarding. I don't know. But yeah, a lot of complicated questions. For example, so. Yeah, it is a big question for a lot of people. All we can say is just be responsible. At the first sight of being allowed out, don't like congregate in classes and just ignore all the rules because we do have our part to play in this as well. But it's exciting. Set your phases to liberation. There's a little Star Trek joke there for you, Maria. I know you love it. Sci-fi.
Completely went over my head, yeah.
No, I thought of it like 10 minutes ago. I knew it was terrible, but I still proceeded with it anyway. But moving from that terrible pun onto our media sensationalism, our sensations. Your photograph was in the paper. In fact, my photograph was in the paper. Your parents loved that photograph. I'm not sure what their real feelings are about the article, but they loved the photograph that was in the middle of all that text. And so we appeared in La Nueva España, which is a regional newspaper in Asturias, the north of Spain. And you revealed that it's the 10th most read paper in Spain, which is some going for a regional newspaper. And because I was too busy, working on this secret Herman Goring project, I've said too much. You spoke to the journalist, and it was a good interview, no?
It was a very good interview, yes.
Yeah, well, of course it was. I mean, you told me about it, and I read it in the newspaper, and he liked our perspective.
Yeah, exactly. He said more people like us were needed, so us the authors. So that's that's good. I mean, I think like he understood. He was sort of like on the same wavelength as the book with regards, how to go about seeing like what stories are genuine or not, and researching sources and so on. I mean, there's a lot of interest at the moment of fake news because obviously they're overseas and now they're all over the place because of all these things to do with coronavirus and all the fake news going around about it all the time. So I mean, I think journalists are eager to find things to do with it and discuss it, and they just obviously come across a book.
Speaking of the book, I mentioned in passing people should buy it, and you gave me a look suggesting that you're going to say something. Were you going to say something about that?
Yeah, I was going to say because you said, well, it might not be selling because the bookshops are closed, but in fact, is at the moment the most bookshops that we've ever had. At the moment, it's on 83 independent bookshops.
That's fantastic, and it's not including the chains, So,
no,
for example,
that's only in the independent bookshops.
And also today, I mean, I take the opportunity to wish you a very happy Poetry Day, Ireland.
Today?
Check it up. Yes, and
I thought
it'd
been already.
Oh yeah, well, history repeats itself, so that might account for that discrepancy. And also, what's the other publication we're in?
Quo.
Quo Vadis. Quo. That's it, exactly.
Only Quo, not Quo Vadis. Are you doing the films again?
Yeah. And that's also a cool thing. So yeah, again, we contribute something to that, and then work in collaboration with the journalist of that piece, and nice to get exposure out there. And I guess probably not as I mean, I'm not sure if it's a 10th most read newspaper, but it's pretty well known. Has a print edition as well. So I'm sure a lot of eyes have laid eyes on it as well. So yeah, well done, team fake news. Yeah, exactly. So the funny thing is that these happened completely out of like the blue. So you know, there's like get got in touch. As I've said before, that people find the book organically and then get in touch, and I hope that happens more in the future as well. Does it feel weird to be interviewed and to be in a newspaper section?
Maybe a little bit, I don't know, but well, we know the book well and we're comfortable with it, so it's nice to be able to explain it.
Exactly, yeah. Well, the thing is, like, I still haven't read your part of the book, the side of the book you wrote, so I'd be stoked if someone asked me about. Uh, I'm only
That's
joking.
rubbish. Yeah, of
I'm
course.
only joking. But all right then. Well, so we've covered the phases, our appearance in a couple of newspapers, and the Instagram chat. Shout out to Mercedes from another podcast who we interviewed the writer, and she actually found it because the interviewer was from Leon. No, that's how I understood it. That the woman interviewing was a Leonesa. That's correct. No,
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 the
it's the other way.
man, the journalist.
Look, all I heard was it was someone was from Leon. It was a 50-50. I got it wrong. All right. So
Yeah,
can we just move on to the next part of this podcast?
we can indeed.
Thanks very much. Yeah, well, big news. I cut my own hair in the middle of this quarantine. That is significant. Throwing back, how would I say this, regularly. But this is a small price to pay because of the coronavirus. But let us talk about, there's three things pending: meditations, Indian dancing, and this documentary from Lebanon that we watched at your behest the other day on Tuesday. So I think maybe we can talk about the Indian dancing because you've discovered a lot of interesting things about that. So I'm not Indian or a dancer. You are a dancer, so you're still 50% more qualified than me to talk about this. So you want to take it away and explain a little bit more?
You could argue you're a dancer too, you know? You've been known to do your ballet dances, which are dancing, which are very popular about
Well,
now in
no, I
Ireland.
have to say,
So,
first of all, well, now that you bring it right, I mean, there's people on the balconies clapping nurses, and I fully support that. But I just want to take this moment to clap the fine people of Amazon Prime who this morning delivered my very first tutu, and I'm just impressed by the service from Amazon and the quality of the material in this tutu as well. But that's just credit where credit is due. But please continue.
you haven't asked me the question yet.
I have asked you the question. I told you to kind of explain what you've learned about this dancing style, why it's relevant. We spoke about it the last couple of days. If you just like synthesize that, I can jump in with my comments as well.
Okay. As always, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've been reading a little bit about, obviously, Bharatanatyam is the dance that I've spoken about before. Obviously, I've been doing Bollywood for a number of years, but this year I started trying out Bharatanatyam. And it's a regional dance basically of the there are many dances, but there's kind of like I think it's 8 specific like regional dances in India, and they all have their peculiarities. But Bharatanatyam is said to be the oldest one of all of them. And what can I tell you? It was quite interesting. I was just wanting to know how old they were, how they all started, how they originated, and a little bit of the history. I'm gonna be doing more on that because I've borrowed a book from the Library of Congress because you can borrow books remotely, and then after 15 days they just disappear off your PDF um, shelf thing. Um, and I'll be reading more about that. But basically, so far, I was just having a look at how they originate in like a few books, religious texts, and also texts that explain how the dance moves should be, what they should be like, the stage. So they kind of like codify. It's like a manual of how a performative dance should be. And in terms of the themes, a lot of them are based on religious texts that go back to like, second millennia BC. And the book that I was saying that codifies sort of like what you have to do, what the stage should be like, clothes and so on. All that is from the second century BC. So it's all like really impressive that there are really ancient performing arts, both dance and theater, and a mixture of the two. And that they still last nowadays. But it was a very interesting episode in the 20th century where they basically, or late 19th century, where they are banned by the British Empire. So I thought you were tossing off there for a second. So they were like taken out of the temple. They were banned from performing in the temple, and they were kind of like marginalized and considered, uh, you know, um, pretty much like prostitutes, to say it clearly. When these dances were part of the temple, and it was like a very sacred art. So because of like this marginalization on the part of the British, then the art started being disappearing, and people just practiced in secret and so on, because it was just like badly regarded. And it only came back Indian independence in the 1940s.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing. And the woman who wrote this book was an American.
Yeah, the book that I'm reading is originally from like 1972 or something like that, and this woman published it at the end of her life. And I think it's one of these cases where she's, of course, a famous figure for, like, within uh, Indian dance, like traditional dancing. But I think the woman that is normally credited with having revived those dances is another person that did it slightly later. So I think it's always the case that the first person to kind of like take something up and doing that is not usually the most famous one or the most credited for having done it. But she was the first person to publish a book in English about Indian dancing, and that came out in 1928. So that was pretty impressive. That at the time she was promoting Indian dancing in America, and she was doing a show there, showing traditional dancing, and well, yeah.
Okay, no, a very interesting figure, because on the other secret project about the ebook about Tibet, we spoke about several things that kind of correspond in terms of, I mean, first of all, you have this figure from the 20s who's drawn to India, which is, of course, close to Tibet. So I imagine like a whole generation of people were lured there by this kind of spiritual quest or this kind of traditional or cultural interest. And, in that ebook that I ghost wrote, I kind of spoke about the tokenism of Orientalism, and how that was like a negative thing. I mean, cultural appropriation and fetishization of deep cultures is obviously something that's very current as well, and it's a big area that you have to dive into, and things that aren't, it's not easy to say black and white, different things are right or wrong, but I think in a broad stroke, the kind of Orientalism of like the early 20th century around the world was something that was quite problematic. But you have these figures that pop up, like this woman who was genuinely interested in looking after the culture and learning about the culture, and she even married, as you said, to me yesterday, like an Indian man, and had a daughter who became a very famous Indian dancer. No. You said
Yes,
is that
yes. She said
okay?
married to me yesterday, and I was like, what? Who got married to you yesterday? Yeah. Yes,
Oh,
she did.
my next door
She
neighbor.
did
I think she got lonely during the quarantine. But no,
quarantine weddings. Yeah.
yeah, on the balcony it was on the news. It was a very special occasion. But and also for example, like I was saying to you yesterday when we were speaking about this, like this kind of time period is kind of curious as well, the 20s. And it's just my personal feeling, but it just feels to me like it's like straddling this division between the old world, the Victorian era, and you still had travelers to India in the 1800s and the 1700s, maybe with more of a religious bent, but still kind of intent on preserving the culture to varying extents. But the 20s, it seems to be like this golden period that was just between moments, and there's like a lot of people going to these far-flung corners, and the world was, to an extent, industrialized and known and globalized in a sense, but it's like a moment just before the world that we kind of know now, and the fact that so many people went to Tibet and India and wrote about it really captures this the kind of richness of the culture. So I don't know, just for me, it's that the time period is inherently fascinating. And also by doing this, I mean, because even in the Tibet book, there's people who copied sacred Tibetan scriptures and Buddhist texts that were later destroyed by the Chinese, for example, and because of their actions, there's a record of it now. And she did this kind of invaluable work as well. No, she came in as a foreigner, got accepted into the culture, but because of her work, the culture was actually preserved from internal forces that maybe would have destroyed it, and also from the effects of colonialism as well. So, and despite that, she's a strangely unknown person whose life has been, I guess, her impact has been forgotten. And this idea of foreigners and people coming in, it's interesting with this dance in particular because, as you alluded to in your description, there's a lot of symbolism here, and I imagine it's quite difficult to plug into that with these gestures from your face that suggest different things, colors suggesting different things. I mean, compared to like something like flamenco or even Irish dancing, or that has its own kind of language as well. But when you see it, you can kind of appreciate the movements and the ambience, for example. Is it possible to transmit something through this dance, even if you're not versed in the what seems like a very dense kind of mythology?
Well, it's interesting you ask me that question because I would be tempted to throw it back at you and ask you, is it? Because I sent you a video which I thought could be, well, something more expressive, less hard to interpret, even if you're not familiar with the type of like facial expressions and symbolism that is used to refer to gods and things like that in Indian dancing. So I don't know. You tell me. Could you get anything out of it? Could you interpret
Um,
anything of what was happening, or was it too obscure? I threw
let me pre-
you in at the
let
deep
me let
end.
me let me preface my answer by saying I thought your dancing was fantastic. Okay.
Well,
Uh,
thanks very much.
uh, and well, no, again, I could appreciate the dancing. There's music and there's patterns, and it can be something that very nice to look at. But if you're asking me if I understood like the story that was being told through the facial gestures, I must confess no. But I must also confess your dancing was still brilliant. And definitely
Okay.
the star of the show. So
Sandwich feedback. Maybe I
yeah,
should have asked
no,
you, did you actually watch the video?
I did watch the video, and no, I mean,
But
there's no sandwich feedback because sandwich feedback is something good, something terrible, and something good. But I mean, it was all good. But I'm just
no,
answering honestly like
it
that.
was
It's
like
not.
it was like clubs. It's like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
No, excellent, very good, That's the kind of sandwich I like to eat. But I'm very hungry, so let's not talk about food. And Um, but I mean, but the idea of the meaning around this is interesting as well because you do mention that the British kind of stopped it and made it something just for tourists, and the form of it became incredibly shortened and diluted, perhaps,
Mm.
And it's very strange because the British Empire does not have a history of that,
I knew you would
not
like
being.
that part of the story. That's why we're picking on it specifically.
Well, if anybody's minded to read our blog, we have a post about Avon de Valera, and in that we discuss the kind of deep links between India and Ireland on account of our shared colonial past. And somebody, I don't know who it was, who was occupying both of us at the same time. Not naming any names, but so again, that's like another interesting thing because it has become completely changed from this outside force. And do you have any sense of what has been maintained or kept intact? Has it been able, I mean, was it recovered successfully, or is it just some kind of approximation of what it once was?
Of course, it would be difficult to say because before, and this is something that I picked up on earlier on, with regards to the fact that it's an art that is, a traditional thing that is taught by a master, and then, each person has a master, and it's all like oral, it's all traditional. So it's not, there isn't such a thing as you go to the conservatory like here. Nowadays, of course, there is, but traditionally, it's not a case of like reading books and studying the steps and things like that. It's a case of like you have a master who's the one that, and to a point, it's the same nowadays, that sort of like unveils different things to you and introduces you into basically the dance. So because of that, then whether it's the same or not exactly would be hard to tell. But I think there's an important component, which is the themes. Like traditionally, they focused on to my best of my understanding, they focused on religious themes, which come from these sacred texts that I was talking about from the like a Vedic period. But then more recently they expanded to other themes, so it's not just like those episodes of like gods fighting or growing up or things to do with how the universe got formed. It's also like other themes, themes to do like with nature or with love or yeah, other universal themes really, but not necessarily religious.
Okay, very good. Sounds very interesting. And the oral tradition in teaching the dancing. I'm not sure if it's common. Obviously, when we hear of an oral tradition, we think of stories being passed um, from person to person around their hearth and the fire, and the embers are in the sky, and it's heavy with dramatic recountings of battles long past. But and for example, something what is interesting is that maybe something inside the dancing as well. You mentioned that yesterday that certain people could only fulfill certain roles in this dance. Could you expand a little bit more on that? Do you remember that? It's like something like a caste system, but in the dancing itself. She's stumped.
I don't know if you're talking about. It's not really
Yes,
to
I
do
am
with.
because I don't want that. I don't want that air in the podcast. So whatever you're going to come out of your mouth, that's what I'm talking about.
Sorry, there was a moment there where I was just checking a technical problem, maybe. But yeah, okay, I'll keep on talking while I check that my battery is not gonna run out. But basically, no, I think you were talking about certain people that I told you this was part of like something that is called kathakali, that is like a type of theater. And essentially what happened there was that the people that are involved in it, also through being marginalized and so on, like we said before, ended up like becoming even more marginalized and falling into drugs and all this. I think this is what you're referring to.
That is what actually was what I was referring to. Yes.
Okay.
Now, for those who can't see it, obviously, because it's a podcast, she is doing a recreation of this dance. I'm judging from her facial expressions that she's representing power, as in does our computer have power? Now, curiosity. Now
Yeah.
she's representing the immigration of the Indian people because she's left her seat. Now returning to the homeland because she's back in her seat. This is a very moving and emotional performance.
It's more the performance of why on earth is like my battery running out if I'm plugged into the
The
mains, but
mainframe.
never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess before you go kaput with the computer and a bit of movement there. This is exciting, dynamic.
You just keep
Okay.
talking.
Okay. So.
Oh, there we go! Yay! Sorry about
Are
that.
you,
It seems that one of the plugs is not working.
or really? Okay, no problem. So are you back now?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I guess we can move on to the documentary from the Lebanon, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, it's called Erased, and it's a documentary. Well, I mean, it's many things. It's a documentary that one reviewer called it a perspective documentary, in the sense that it's not a fully fledged or fully formed documentary, that it's a speculative one, because it also jumps over into the realm of performance art, performative arts as well. It's like something you'd see in a museum, like a display. What do you call that in a museum when there's a video being played? There's a phrase for that.
Audiovisual.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So it's this kind of these different elements, and it's set after the civil war in Lebanon, and it centers around the theme of disappearance, which is kind of similar to the documentary we saw before, which is about absence rather than disappearance. This documentary is about actual disappearances of people, people who've been disappeared by the government. And it starts with this guy who has a photograph, and it seems like an empty space. And this is something about the documentary as well. I mean, a lot of long shots of photographs or him working on an image. So it's definitely something that takes some patience. But anyway, it starts with this photograph, and then eventually you kind of realize that there's an outline of three figures of a guy who's been dragged away by two soldiers, and the whole thesis of the documentary is that this guy, who's been dragged away, the photographer, not the photographer actually, the guy who doctored the photograph, saw him years later, and he felt that this guy, he had scars, his face was damaged, but he recognized the guy, and then he got lost in the crowd. And in the same sense, this documentary gets lost, not in a negative sense, but gets kind of swept up in the story of all the people that have been disappeared. That his story does not make sense in isolation; it only makes sense in the entirety and totality of all the people that are disappeared by the government. And it starts with him talking to the photographer of the photograph he doctored, and kind of goes from there. Again, straddling photographic techniques, artistic renderings, imaginings, but also working with the primary material, newspaper archive speeches that again relate to the concept of people who are missing and are not allowed to be dead, because to declare them officially dead would be a way of admitting guilt on part of the Syrian or Lebanese governments. And there's family members who've grown old waiting for them to come back, who have themselves died, and these people are still alive. So it's a topic, to quote another reviewer, that's analyzed with an intellectual distance. And I have my thoughts on it. Generally, I liked it, and I can expand more. But I also know that you liked it, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that as well.
Um, well, I think you explained it, like summed it up like really well, the essence of it. But there were
Okay, well,
like to
see you
them.
next week then for our next episode.
There were like two dimensions to it, weren't they? Like we actually saw it and interpreted it in a way. But as you were saying, in terms of reviewing, some other people like thought it was just a kind of like notes of a creative process. But for us, it was more than that. It wasn't it like through showing you the creative process. He just explained basically the subjectivity of this of his experience, because the fact that these people had disappeared and there's no information about them and so on, it just had to be filled in with something. You had to compensate in some way, and what he did was basically um, through telling the story in a way artistically of how he got into it and how he investigated it, he added that dimension to it that was missing from the facts. I think if that makes any sense.
No, it does make sense. And I think it's good because, like, I mean, there's frequent scenes where he's like on street corners and with a chisel, and he's chiseling away at advertisements for concerts or whatever to find the photographs of missing people underneath. And then sometimes he fills, and this is like again long shots and takes a while for this all to kind of become apparent. And then he fills them in with pens or pencils or paintings, and it's an act of reclamation as well. These people have been forgotten, and he's reclaiming not just their memory, but also he's reclaiming this part of the city. I mean, because he shows places that have become, since the Civil War, maybe golf clubs or hotels and fancy places, and that's fine because cities change constantly. There's no doubt about that. But in a culture where people don't have the right to die and they don't have the right to be remembered, it's kind of a very powerful act. And yes, I mean, seeing the artistic process is quite significant here as well, because when we watched the other Lebanese documentary, we saw, again, long takes, not as long as this one, but long takes of a car driving away, as we mentioned in that podcast, or of somebody making coffee or tea. And because this process again is longer and more significant, it's more compelling for it. Um, and again, I mean, you have to watch it, and maybe it sounds airy fairy what we're talking about, but basically, it's in the sense of like flipping things as well, because like he, has the first photograph that starts the thing, that the whole documentary is of, that he's intentionally removed the protagonists of the photograph. And normally when we see photographs that have had this done to them, it's because someone like Stalin has fallen out with one of his political rivals or an enemy, and a photograph of them on a bridge, it gets doctored and that person's not on the bridge anymore. It's just Stalin and some other guy, which is a real photo I'm referring to. I can't remember which one. But this guy is doing two things. He's removing them so they can be remembered, and he's completely flipping the idea of political deletion through altering photographs. So this kind of official cataloging, which can be misremembered or abused. He's taking that and subverting it in a very elegant way as well. And what I like, this also touches on the issues of commemoration. I mean, we've been talking about commemorating as well. I can't remember why, but we were by chance talking about it at the start of the week. And again, like, yeah, official histories, commemorations are usually done by the state. But what he's doing is like he is codifying and organizing and remembering on a industrial scale, on a very organized scale. And he's performing the commemorative actions now. And again, this is a subversion because he's not the government, and in fact, he's doing it in opposition to the government. So like there's all these elements to it as well, and it's beautiful in parts. Also, we mentioned that it's like an installation. That's the word I was looking for in a museum, like an installation, because
Oh yeah.
some of the English captions are not really translated very well. And I know, you mentioned the other day, this is because Arabic is very difficult to translate. Even if you're like, hey, where's the stapler? It's very flowery in Arabic. You know what I mean?
That's
Apparently,
right.
according to you, the source of
It's
everything
true.
today.
According to me.
Uh, um, and you can hear him, tutting when he's drawing things, and it's like he is talking to us, and I think that kind of elevates it in two ways as well, because again, it's like an installation. It's like, you're seeing this performance, another type of performance in a museum, even though you're watching it on your computer screen or your TV, and there's like a museum exhibition element to it. But also, because it's dealing with newspapers and speeches, I'm sure we've all been in a position where we hear something or read something, and our internal monologue is like, like, what are they talking about? We have a reaction to it. And even though he's an artist, his artistry is based on these journalistic sources, and that's how he's responding to it as well. So you can kind of see the pain in him as a human, as an artist, and somebody who consumes the news like we all do. So, like, I think, there's a lot of stuff at play here, and it's like we've mentioned with the other documentaries, and again, this is like on an Arabic website where the movies were free for a brief period. How the stories they're telling are interesting because they're unique stories, but also they're told in a very distinctive way. So to the greater Arabic worlds, thank you for your cinema. So no, it's a difficult subject. It deals with something very important, but it is a beautiful documentary, I think, in all its parts. I think you agree with that as well, no?
I definitely agree with that. And there's also a short film which you are due to watch, I believe.
We're tackling the
Um,
news.
no, that's a long film, but there was a short film that I recommended to you as well from the website that,
Um,
funnily enough, deals with the theme of stories as well. So that's on your
well,
list, I believe.
yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but just let me qualify that by saying your dancing was fantastic. Okay, and
There we go.
I will get around to it. I promise. So yeah, so it's amazing stuff. I guess we can end on a light note,
Mm.
or maybe not a light note, but something maybe that's useful, actionable, for
Fun
people at this
fact.
time. Not fun facts, but meditative facts, meditation. You have been doing it apparently. You're all zen. There's like this zenness radiating off you. You know.
Well, thank you. um, I would say exactly that, but I mean, in terms of no, I wouldn't say exactly that I've been doing it. But well, I listened to a little bit about it, and also like tried a couple of things, but I wasn't completely convinced. I must admit.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So not a light note to end on then.
Okay, meditation is very good for you, kids.
Ah,
No,
for
no, I
kids.
think no, but I think the most, I mean, it ties in because I think one of the most important things to do with it is like it takes time to, for certain people, if you're somebody who's constantly like, pondering things and planning things ahead and so on, or if you're somebody who's very reflective, then sometimes it's very difficult to follow something that is telling you don't think of any of those things and just focus on the here and now. And that's what I was getting at, that I think it's a process as well of like, because obviously I've been reading about it. You've told me about it before as well in the Russian Brown podcast, that it's got like obvious, you see, I listen to you. It's got like obvious advantages and it's good for concentration, it's good for your mental state. Um, and obviously there's a long tradition of it, so it must be good. But I think it's, of course, as anything, there are many things that are not the real deal or whatever, and maybe they're not the best ones. So you just need to find one that is good for you, and like try different things, and I guess be a bit patient, because it's not something that everybody's automatically inclined to be able to do. I can see that you're laughing a bit. Why is that?
No, I'm not saying. I just know, like for example, for people who don't like yoga and they want to de-stress, in Madrid there was a hotel that was being demolished a few years ago, and you could like go and get a sledgehammer and just like
Oh God, you
destroy.
remember that? Yeah.
No, yeah, I did a lesson on it as well and everything, and
Yes, so did I.
but also, I mean, I haven't really tried meditation, but I mean, I've seen like yoga videos, and I tried it once, and I'm sure it's very good. But it's just like, okay, now turn slightly, keep your leg at a level angle, and breathe at a half pace, and exhale on the second beat or something like that. You know, I just yeah, it's just what. So that's why you have Zen probably, because you're focusing on the instructions, how to do it properly. But okay, so that is very much that, I believe. Thank you very much for tuning in. We've actually updated our Patreon page. I'm going to put the link in for the first time in the podcast. Also, our street tour you can do on Google now. You can follow our street tour online. We're going to put that link in there as well. And if you're not tired of links, we're going to put a link into the book and a few other things. And sure, why not? You know. And where else can they find us, Mary?
I thought you were gonna say what more links can we put. You can find us on Facebook, El Arpa Media, on Twitter at El Arpa1, and our blog, irishliceofmadrid.com.
Sorry, did you say Facebook or Facebook?
I said face.
Oh,
Look at my
okay.
Facebook.
I can see your face. Okay, well, thank you very much. All right, this is me saying good luck. All right, and you?
Bye.
Okay, don't hang up on me now. All right, just press not record.
That's what I'm doing.